All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Extremely excited to sit down with my main man, Clay, and record another amazing episode of Legend of the 75th. It is truly an honor to be able to do something like this and to capture and preserve Ranger history as we do this in every single episode. This is also the first episode that we've actually recorded since we did the mental health roundtable. So Clay and I have had a lot of time to talk, reflect, and think about the directions of the 11 to 75th podcast, and then also, what we want to really kind of dive in with the guests. So we'll get into that as we get going in the episode. And I cannot think of a better Ranger to kind of help us guide this conversation and to sit down and share his story than Sergeant Major retired Chris Greca. So if you don't know Sergeant Major Greca, he served in 275, 175. He has 3 Legions of Merits, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, 48 months total deployed, and also retired as a U.S. CENTCOM CSM. I see it. I almost fucked up. I almost called you Sergeant Major. Chris? He said he would hang up. He said he would hang up if I said
Don't drop the call yet.
Chris, it is an absolute honor to have you on Legends. How's it going?
Hey, good, man. Hey, don't cut that portion out about that Chris thing, man. I think identity, identity is important, and Mike Clay, it's certainly something that we're going to discuss. Hey, I love that intro, man. Love it. I've done the guest speaking gig at Ranger School one time, and I did it because General Garrett's son and General Garrett's close personal friend, Mike Garrett, was graduating.
I love General Garrett.
So do I. And what I told all those students out there is today is just the beginning. And it's about that Ranger creed, and there's a lot of discussion. Hey, what's a real Ranger? You got to be in regiment. No, yes, no, maybe so. Tab is just a school. It scrolls away a life, all the rest of that shit. And my response to that was, you're a real Ranger if you live that creed. Each and every single day. Initially, it's memorization and just remembering words, but you say it long enough. You say it every morning in formation, and I promise, man, that creed starts to guide your conduct and behavior, man. So, listen, that intro, brother, keep that intro up, man, because it's all about our creed.
Yeah. I got to be honest with you, and I mean, obviously, I guess I'd be biased, because I wrote it, but. Well, that's actually a lie. I had a couple of friends help me, kind of QC it and everything else and provide some thoughts to it. But, so I've read it, about 40 times now, 40 plus times. And it still sends chills down my spine. It still gives me goosebumps every time I read the damn thing, because.
Yeah. What happened to the day, Mike, though, that, Rangers really knew it. And listen, I'm not trying to be critical. I'm not one of those guys, hey, back when hard, none of that shit. But sometimes when I hear people and they can't recite it, man, it's an immediate loss of credibility. And I think we've been to a few public ceremonies lately.
Recently. Yeah.
Recently.
Yeah.
When from my understanding, they even have it in their hands. And it's like, first of all, in your hands, are you kidding me? No. He's a Ranger Hall of Fame guy, so Lieutenant General retired Gary Spear. And I love, they used to call him the Grinch because he kind of looked like that cartoon caricature of the Grinch. And his first day of battalion command, we were doing battalion PT, and he said, first stanza of the Ranger Creed, repeat after me. Crickets. And you could literally feel in this battalion formation, people start to shuffle and get easy. And our XO at the time, Stanley Clemens, jumped up to the plate and said, recognizing that volunteer as a Ranger, and then he kind of picks it up and recites it. And in General Spear, with giving him the credit, he got down, did his push-ups or whatever it is. But I'll tell you, Mike, I don't think he ever recovered from that. I don't think, in other words, in the eyes of a young Ranger, it goes back to being more than just a board question or a picture on a wall. You talking about losing credibility and power, man. Something like our creed, Our creed, shit, man, because you're exactly right. It's all about that. So, and General Spear, I still love you. Right, big heart. Chris Greca is keeping my heart right now.
I mean, I think you're right because I've seen. I mean, I remember, the recent one that we're all talking about here.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, just, I mean, it was an amazing ceremony, all of it.
yes,
Everything.
yes,
Even though the people that
yeah,
were coming up and speaking, like, they were going a little long, but that's okay. We love them,
yeah,
and that's their moment, like, rightfully so.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
that ending,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
man,
Dude, and I think really what was disheartening for me is those like four of them are like really close friends of mine. I mean, we're not, in years past. Don't get me wrong. I know the Ralph Borjas and Mellon. I know all those guys, but
right,
my friends, my wingmen, the ones that I was running with, were some of those gentlemen this year, and I just thought to myself, what a shitty ending, man, to a great
uh,
ceremony. Yeah, and I'm not sure who had oversight, whether it was Chavez or Brett or a combination of the two. I'm sure
I don't
somebody.
know.
Yeah, I don't either, man.
I
Either.
talked to. I want to. I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to give me myself accolades because I'm the dumbest ranger that ever existed. But I was recently talking to one of my old rangers, and he was one of those guys. He didn't serve like a really long time, like 5 or 6 years, but we were just, we were talking, catching up. It had been a while and everything else. And we were talking about the Ranger Creed and we were talking about that. And he's like, at the time, it was so annoying. But he's like, now, like many years removed, doing things that I've done in the civilian world, and he does a bunch of stuff with the federal police and all this stuff. He's like, that every morning
Yeah,
that we were in garrison, or even when we were in the field, like, and whenever the conditions allowed for it, we had a formation and we
yeah,
said the fucking Ranger Creed as a company. And this
yeah,
wasn't this, we're not talking about like before the GWAT. This is 2016. Okay.
yeah,
Like, like this was pretty recent. Like we did it every damn morning. We cycled through, like everybody got their shot to say the Ranger Creed in a given week. Well, not everybody, but most people,
yeah,
got their
yeah,
shot to say the Ranger Creed, and I was included. I was in the rotation. Like we all said it, and like I wonder if that stuff still happens. And I'm not trying to, Monday, dig
yeah.
over back, but I bet you not. I bet it doesn't
Yeah.
happen as much as it used to.
Or backseat drive that thing. Listen, I'm extremely confident with Brett Johnson.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So in other words, and I got it. That's echelons above
Right.
where those young Rangers are running out in those fire teams and those squads. But I mean, it was even like so I left regiment or 275 in 93 to become a drill sergeant. So 93 to 96 here at Fort Benning, they had a drill sergeant school here. So I ended up being an instructor for 18 months at Fort Benning, but I was on the trail for 18 months. And during that time, I'd been in the Army 7 years, 6 years, whatever, man. It wasn't a long period of time. But Chris Greca, no shit, was saying, hey, I'm going to go make it hard like when I came in. So it was like that mentality of every generation believes that the generation before them or the way that they had previously done it was the right way.
Right.
It's like asking the question why. Like if a young private goes, well, why?
Yeah.
Listen, I am the biggest fan in the world of that. I got disciplined behavior and disciplined initiative, and hey, man, proper response to orders and the whole 9 yards. But young people saying why, dude, that makes sense. My first duty assignment in the Army was Korea, and then I went to 275. And I swear to God, for a year, I didn't know what an operation. So I got to 275, after going through RIP and the whole 9 yards, and they're like 5 paragraphs of an op order. I'm like, what the fuck's an op order? I mean, no kidding. And it was like, so for a year, I followed the guy in front of me over in Korea and did what the guy next to me or in front of me was doing over in Korea. I really didn't have an understanding of why and how I fit into the bigger picture. So
Right.
this idea of mission command as a philosophy, and one of the principles or tenets is a shared understanding, right? And I'm a huge fan of letting young men know, and women, here's how you fit into the fucking bigger picture. Here's why you're important. If you don't know why you're important and you're just out there, you're going to be shit talking the Army when you get out. And we're going to have a retention problem just like we're having right now.
Yeah.
Not only is the available market small, but on top of it, those that are separating who have bad experiences go back to their hometowns and don't tell their buddies, or wherever they go to. They don't tell their buddies, their friends, their coworkers in their next profession or their next job, hey, join the Army, man. It's a great, listen, whether it's for 4 years, 6 years, 8, whatever, or a career. Great way to get a college education, great way to have medical care for your family, the whole 9 yards. We just need to be careful, man, because I swear to you, dude, everybody I talked to, their experience, Mike, sucked. I mean, I'm not kidding you. And I don't know if I'm just finding those guys and gals, like I'm a bad luck charm or some shit, but everybody I talk to, it's like, Sergeant Major, and I'm getting at, Sergeant Major. And I was like, okay, stop that shit. But anyway, they'll tell me their story, and I'm like, God bless, man. God bless. And we wonder why we have a retention issue sometimes. Got to take care of those we have in formation.
I agree.
I
like that point on shared understanding, Chris, because I really think when you look at it, we have some separation between our 10 years of service, where you were very senior to me at the time I was getting senior, and so on and so forth. But I think, as we're having a conversation, and when you really talk to our community out there, I think we bought into it after we got past a little bit of the ego. And don't get me wrong, ego gets you places in life, and I think we all have a smidge of it, and it's good to want to win. But that whole shared understanding piece just goes into relationship to where it's not disrespectful for me to ask you, the CENTCOM CSM, in a briefing, if I raise my hand politely with tact, which I know I have because we've been there before, to ask you to give me a little more specified information so I could take that back to my team and share that understanding. And I appreciate you really driving that home, because I think that's important to our audience, is just take a little time to be open-minded, to hear the greater picture from your subordinate or your senior. And it's not about disrespect. It's truly about understanding. Now, if it's a disrespectful way of it, I get it. And seniors got to do what seniors got to do. And that's a lesson learned on the spot, maybe. But I think that's a really good point. I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, Clay, I'll tell you, man. And so kind of when they started defining that, and at the time it was doctrine 2015, and this was 2013 time frame ish, I thought to myself, man, this is the way regiment's been operating. Like, so if every Ranger is truly a sensor and he or she is trying to detect PIR that's out there, the commander's priority intelligence, they only can detect it if they truly understand what the commander wants to know from the battlefield and what to extract. And too many times, man, you can't, especially over in Afghanistan, as I would circulate, or Iraq, the question always was, what are you doing? What is your job? Well, Sergeant Major, I'm pulling security. Yeah, dude, I got that, man. What are you doing out at this JSS? What's the bigger picture? What is your troop or your company trying to accomplish out here in Iraq? So that was always a question I had. It was interesting, and I'll leave it at this interesting conversation. General Votel takes over. He switches from SOCOM to CENTCOM, and he comes on board. And I'm getting ready. Chris Greca really wants to retire at this time. I mean, because I'm to the point where physically I'm just NBA, man. I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping. I'm chewing Ambien like they're candy. I'm just doing shit that's just I was unhealthy physically, mentally, and if you go to our Ranger Creed, what it tells us, Chris Greca could not live that Ranger Creed anymore. So I just wanted out of the Army. But anyhow, in one of the first meetings that we had with General Votel, we were talking about, hey, why does CENTCOM exist? And General Garrett used to say it best. In the newcomers briefings, he would tell everybody assigned to CENTCOM that was signing into the headquarters, we exist for 3 reasons: protect the homeland, make it an away game versus a home game, stop the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction with VEO, violent extremist organizations or nation states like we had Iran, those 20 countries. Iran was our fucked up one, obviously. And then the last one was free free flow of trade and commerce. And in the CENTCOM AOR, it's those 3 choke points: the Suez Canal, Bab el Mandeb off of Somalia, other side Yemen, and then as you get up to the Persian Gulf. So he said that, and fundamentally, I thought it was so simple. It was brilliant. It was a Mike Hall thing, right? Mike is great at just saying something that you go, fuck, that's, oh, I already, Sergeant Major, I already knew that. And then you're writing shit down, right?
Right.
And then says something else, and you're like, God, I knew that. And then he starts writing shit down again. And I think that's what, hopefully, General Botel, as we were having this discussion, extracted, because I took it from General Garrett and I stole it. So this wasn't a Chris Greca-ism that I said we exist for 3 reasons. This was me going to a newcomer brief with General Garrett and stealing it from him. So giving all credit where credit is due, it was the man, but it made people understand bigger picture. And I would argue that all geographic commands almost exist for the same reason, at least the first 2: protect the homeland for making an away game with our joint international, multinational, interagency partners that exist out there. So it's the same. I think that last one, the free flow of trade and commerce, that can slightly change from AOR, geographic AOR to AOR, but I think we're trying to do the same things.
Well, I think, the simplicity of communication, that's definitely like one piece. But I think, going back to like the original, kind of point you were making, when we were kind of going down this line of logic, I think a thing that leaders just don't often kind of consider when they're talking about what they're going to communicate, priorities, whatever it is, guidance, intent, everything else, is that the fundamental understanding that there's going to become a point as a leader where you're going to need to look at your formation at whatever echelon we're talking about, and you're going to tell them, I need you to do this thing. I can't promise your safety. I can't promise all of you are going to come home alive. I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And this is the key part. I don't have fucking time to tell you why. Because you don't sometimes. Sometimes in life or death situations, whatever you're doing, you just need movement, momentum created, and violence action, or whatever it might be, right? Okay.
Yep.
Now, we all say, well, we're in the Army, like, whatever, that's what you're supposed to do. Yeah, okay. Again, we all understand that. But, if you don't build as much as you possibly can before that moment arises, then you're not going to get the commitment. You're not going to get the buy-in that time creates for you as a leader, or trust, respect built, as a leader. Because, I have commanders, there's many commanders when I was younger and I just didn't know better. I was like, I follow them to fucking hell, covered in gasoline. I didn't really know what the hell that meant. It just sounded really cool. Now as a retired CSM, and I reflect on the later part of my year, there's actually only a few commanders that's actually true for. And the reason is because I trusted them implicitly because of just what they did in their time. And I always knew they were making the hardest decisions, but they had everybody's best interest in mind at all times. And sometimes it wasn't necessarily the individual, but it was the organization, and they were doing the best they could, because, we all know, especially at higher echelons, it's usually just a shitty decision. It's just the worst shitty decision, But anyway, my point, coming back to what you were originally talking about, is what I think is fundamentally wrong, and why we see some of the things that we see. And here we are, all the retired old guys, sitting there Monday day, backseat driving now, but is that's been lost. That we have a generation that has grown up questioning everything and having all information available to them at any given fucking time. And we just think, well, they're in the Army, they're going to do what I say. No, like earn their fucking respect, man. Do the work, do your goddamn job, and get down there, communicate till you're blue in the face, and then start communicating again and build that trust and respect over time.
Yeah, Mike, I couldn't agree more with you. And I'll tell you, man, I mean, just quick vignette, man. There was a battalion commander that was deployed 2010, 2011 to RC South in Afghanistan. And they needed to ruck up and they needed to get outside the FOB, their piece of tactical infrastructure, so we could get Taliban man and everybody else off our ass. And he had some junior officers that reported him to IG because he wasn't fiddling around with them. In other words, that disciplined, not only disciplined behavior, but disciplined initiative in the absence of friggin' this. And I'll tell you, I mean, we had to fight for this guy to get him promoted past lieutenant colonel. And in my humble opinion, listen, the fear factor, we've all been there, right? So it's real easy to sit here in the continental United States in the luxury of our, cool guy rooms that we're all sitting in right now, right? But I'll tell you, when you get over there, I mean, people can think all they want to. Watch this on LinkedIn, watch this on YouTube. Unless you've been there, sometimes it's hard. And not only saying the words, but then getting out front of them and saying, do as I do. That's what motivates them. And I say motivates them. That's what gets them to move, in my opinion.
I agree.
Absolutely. I think both points that you both made through this portion of the conversation is trust. And you hit the key word, in my opinion, Mike, is that it's respect. And how do you earn that respect? By knowing your job, knowing it well, building the trust. So in the moment in time that subordinate understands that, hey, pick a title, doesn't have time to explain what's going on, but I trust them implicitly that I'm going to execute on faith and confidence based upon the trust that is established. All those key words that we step upon, and really it's the bedrock of everything we do when we ask another to do something, whether it's our kids, whether it's our family, whether it's our friends. They're going to listen to us more ineptly when we have their trust. And at the point that's diminished, and we know that's a whole separate conversation of how you re-earn trust and how tough that is. And I know Chris Greca's got some probably more vignettes to talk about trust on too.
But Clay, that's so spot on, because trust was the bedrock of the profession, right? So when ADRP1 or ADP1 came out, literally, it's like one of the opening things is talking about trust based on mutual respect. So it's not just trust. And then, by the way, disciplined behavior isn't just disciplined initiative just isn't an initiative doing what the fuck you want to. It's discipline. And that discipline piece is the training, education, and experience that we all received over our lifetime. And then those young men and women are looking at Clay Usi going, you know what? I trust him because I do have that mutual respect, but it's his training, education, and experience, experiential being the big one, that's going to drive him to the correct decision based off the circumstances. So, or based off the situation. So, yeah, it's spot on, Clay. I'll tell you, trust, and more trust. But that's an easy word to say. It's a hard word to really live and do.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree. It definitely is. And that's part of the problem, with what we see is that it's hard to do. So a lot of people just don't do it.
Yeah.
And then it just propagates over time. Individuals are not taught about that core fundamental, and how important that is. And then they just continue to replicate that. Well, I guess I'm retired now, so I guess that shitty leadership,
Yeah, Mike, you're so spot on, man. And dude, I'll tell you, man, the thing about it is you're recent. You and Clay are a hell of a lot more recent, aka relevant, especially at the ground level. Dudes like me that were flying in the 25,000 foot range, kind of when I was getting out of the Army, way up there in the friggin' stratosphere, trying to help leaders make the right decisions, was all about young men and women not going, you know what, those older folks are jackasses. These because that's what we did, right? When we were growing. And I did. I looked at my leadership and I'm like, who does this? Why are we showing up 12 hours prior to a jump to go through this sequence in the 80 seconds? I said, I'm so worn out. By the time I hit the drop zone, man, Chris Greca was done, man. Done. D-U-N, right? So it was like, gosh, blessed, man. I mean, can't we do things a little bit smarter? You know, and that's what it was about. So, and I had some bad experiences, man. I'll tell you. I mean, I'm like most people. I was telling a kid the other day, I said, I would not have stayed in the Army for 31 years had it been that I was not PCSing and changing jobs and the leaders were PCSing. So let's call it every 24, 36 months, it seemed like a new job, regardless if I moved or not, because my leadership was on. And, you know, the culture, the organizational climate that was being built off that, you know, or driven based off the culture, dude, it was changing. And in a drop of a dime, I could be in a good organization. I never understood what a good and a bad battalion commander in CSM could do to an organization until I lived it. And I went, holy shit, man. Went from two dudes that were rocking the world to two new dudes that it was just like everything was a threat. If you do this, I'll burn you for this. I'm going to burn you for that. I'll give you an article and I'll throw you in jail. It's like, God bless, man. I mean, leading through fear and intimidation is a tactic, but in my opinion, man, it's a poor way of doing business, man.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or how exhausting it is as a CSM to compensate for a terrible fucking commander.
Dude, listen, man, I blessed as a battalion guy. I had a commander who was an enlisted guy in 175, late 70s, early 80s, and he was really, really good. So, you know, remember, I do all my CSM time in the conventional army. So I'm out at good old Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I'm blessed with a guy he listens, man. And truly, he was kind of my wingman. I mean, there was nothing kind of off limits with Colonel Ron Metternich. Just had the best hair I've ever seen in my life, man. He had that sexy part going on the side where he had the little frizzy things sticking up. But anyway, I had a tremendous relationship. Past that did not always exist. It didn't always exist. But you know what? I always said to myself, Mike, listen, and even at younger, probably at the sergeant first class level, no, even staff sergeant, I kind of learned, listen, I had an obligation to my soldier. And that was the obligation to speak up. Right. Now you can say anything. I say it all the time. You can say anything. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Right. So I could tell you you're fucked up. Just do it in a way in which you're like, hey, did that guy just tell me how fucked up I was? You know, and everybody's looking around when you do it. There's like 4 or 5 moments in my career over the course of 31 years that I said or did something that was so unpopular. And when I say popular, man, these things were like, whoo, people literally couldn't believe I was doing these things. Yet I stood my ground because I refused to friggin' back down because I thought, based off my training, education, experience, that it was the right thing to do. And it always involved people. It always involved either backing people or going after people that I say going after, bad word. But just trying to stick up for people. In the Army, unfortunately, in my opinion, and I got to say my opinion, make sure you get this on the podcast, you're guilty until proven innocent. Right? And that's for Article 15, that's for a laundry list of shit. When you are accused of something, whether it's Article 32 or UCMJ or whatever, you're guilty until proven innocent. And there were times where I was like, this person, you gotta be kidding me, man. Yeah, I mean, he or she just, really? I'm thinking to myself, really? And dude, man, I became besides that person, I was the second most unpopular dude in that whatever echelon or organization I was at. but I thought I thought I had an obligation. I should have been fired as a brigade CSM. If my brigade commander's listening to this, sir, I'm still sorry for you. You know what I'm talking about. I should have been fired because I forgot my Ranger creed and courtesy to superior officers and some other things, and it wasn't. I forgot. It wasn't what you say; it's how you say it in the environment where you do this. Do you do it private? Do you do it publicly? And I just failed at a certain point. He was a good man. He meant well, and I just, it's bad. I told Dan Daly, Dan Daly was butted up next to me, and I said, "Hey, I'm getting fired tonight, man." We used to talk every night, and we were both brigade CSMs, and I said, "Dude, Chris Greca is getting fired, man. This shit's about to come down." And God, whatever, man. It didn't happen. So anyway, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you, Mike.
No, you're good. I was just going to say that I think any NCO has to test that line, figure out where that fucking line is, and then then reassess and recalibrate and then drive forward, push through the adversity that the situation creates so that they can actually be a better leader for it. I mean,
absolutely.
Mine wasn't as a CSM. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did have my missteps as a CSM, but mine was definitely when I was a sergeant first class, when I was Ranger platoon sergeant. I really messed up. Daryl Thies saved my ass. Bernie Felino saved my ass. But for all intents and purposes, not only should I have been fired, I probably should have been, chapter.
I love Daryl, but listen to your point. Everybody makes a mistake. There's none of us that are perfect. I say it all the time. My biggest fear with the military right now is it's becoming zero defect, right? So you can't make the mistakes that, Mike and Clay made and Chris made as young guys. If it was today, man, I'd be chapter out of the Army. I mean, because you can't, they just don't allow for mistakes like that to be made. I was fighting in bars like you couldn't believe when I was out in 275. And initially, it was kind of funny to my platoon leadership, and then it became unfunny. At a certain time, they were like, "Hey, this is getting old, man. I mean, every weekend you're getting picked up by the police or you're doing this, and it's getting old." But I was just an angry young man at the time for several reasons. So. The zero defect, man. We have to be careful. It's something I used to voice on the senior enlisted council. It's the BOD, and then the BOD became the SAC, and it was that little panel with the SMA to kind of give recommendations to the CSA, the chief. And I would bring it up all the time, man. We created this thing called positions of trust. I was like, what the fuck is this positions of trust? And we create it, and then we tell people if you go to behavioral health, you can't serve in a position of trust. So you're good enough to be a squad leader and lead men and women in combat downrange, but you're not good enough. That's right. That's right. Yep. And I'm like, Mike, I was like, this is crazy, man. Yep. I mean, give waiver ability to the first CSM and his or her commander in the chain of command. You guys know whether they'd be good drill sergeants. Yep. Just trying to, dude, man, it used to. My head felt like was exploding, man, every time we'd get in these conversations.
I had a commander, going back to the zero defect thing, and it's definitely a slippery slope, but he would always, definitely in like very serious situations, when we were dealing with things, he would go and he would always look at me, and like the first couple times didn't kind of get it, but then over time, like it's just something that like I just respected the hell out of the guy about. We would go, Sergeant Major, does this need to be a learning lesson or is this a career ending lesson? I'd be like, and the first time I'm like, to stay. But then over time I'm like, yeah, okay, let me think about that, and then,
good for him. Good.
Yeah. Good. He, man, I'll tell you what, Colonel Thomas Hof, he should have been in Ranger Regiment. And just things happen, deployments happen, but that guy should have been a Ranger Regiment. He would have been You'd have been the RCO. You'd have been, oh man, dude was amazing.
It's all timing. I actually had this discussion right after the ceremony in Building 4 or McGinnis Wickham Hall that we were talking about earlier. And I was walking out with this '06, who's a very, very good friend of mine. He's a very good friend of Darren Bonds, too, by the way. We both know him from different assignments. And me and this colonel got in this discussion, reference the ceremony and eligibility and the whole 9 yards. And who's a Ranger? And he goes, man, I always wanted to serve in a regiment. He goes, I'm so envious. He goes, I go to ceremonies like this but to your point, it was timeline. There were so many factors involved with it that it was like, but it can be said, Mike, on the same thing. If you got out of regiment, getting back into regiment, I grabbed a couple rifle first sergeants when we stood up the organization at Fort Polk. Brian Dillingham and Kirk Johnson, both out of 175, and they were both told, "Hey, listen, do a little bit of first sergeant time, then you can come back." Shit, dude. Shit. At the time they weren't. I'm not sure the charter time. I think is what it's called now. I'm not sure. It was being emphasized because I couldn't get those two guys back in, and they were, by the way, rock stars, man.
Yeah,
rock stars. So life's easy when you're a CSM and you got first sergeants like that, man. I mean, you just sit back and let them do their thing. Even at good old Fort Polk, Louisiana. I gotta love it, man. Gotta love it. Hey, I love that CTC thing, dude. I'm not kidding you. When I became the post sergeant major there, the opportunity to go out for each rotation, to just drive around, talk to the OCTs, talk to the kids that were out there. Then I'd go out to this thing. It's called the ranch, man. So the ranch is where all the OCTs go to, all the seniors, the lieutenant colonels and the sergeant majors. And I would sit in there with my boss, the CG, and just kind of listen to these topics. And you're talking about backseat driving, man. Overly critical of a lot of units, and I'd go, dude, we do this to everybody, man.
Yeah,
we come in and we're like, hey, you're fucked up, and it's like, actually, they're pretty good, man.
Yeah.
Hey, why do you got all these Z casualties? Well, they came from Alaska, where it was 3 degrees and it's 95 out here with humidity. It's like, holy shit. So anyway, man, I love that assignment. I love that assignment for just the teaching aspect of it. So I was blessed, man. I just dumbed my way into a bunch of assignments, but that one was phenomenal. Good enough to stay at Fort Polk for an extended period of time. I was there like seven years.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I was there 7 years. Battalion, brigade, and then the post sergeant major. And I wasn't planning on moving, man. That was one of those situations like the other jobs where I got a call at a certain time and they were like, "Are you interested?" And my initial response was no, I'm not interested. I love my job here. I love what I'm doing. And then it was actually my wife who said, "Listen, if you're going to be one of those retired guys who gets out and says, I could have been, I could have been." And there was a deployment on the horizon. So I was doing things based on where I tell people all the time, moving up was never, ever about, the number of stars you work for, any of that bullshit. Never. It was the influence. So the higher you got, you could start to influence and shape. And whether, starting at about the 3-star level, it was at the strategic level that you're starting to shape the Army in their business model of like eArmy-U and all the rest of that shit, and leader development and training and doctrine and all the rest of that stuff, lessons learned. How do you capture that and bring it in? And how do you make it important to NCOs?
Right.
I initially was getting that job out of Leavenworth, and people were like, "Hey, you're going to go train majors." And I'm like, "Shit, I'm going to go train majors." But I think I think my wife's really going to dig the house. I think it's big. And then I got out there, and I swear to you, Mike, 2% of the portfolio might have been training majors.
Yeah.
And the other 98% of the portfolio were these centers of excellence, their proponents driving doctrine through it, the lessons learned that we were getting at the time in both Afghanistan and Iraq, pushing it back. So there were all these things that I was doing that my eyes was just getting open to how the Army is a kind of this business model and how it churns, especially on the generating force side with TRADOC and what they're doing. I was like, God, I'm a dummy, man. I thought, like, God, you are so fucking dumb, man. And the only blessed part is my boss at the time, General Perkins, who went to be on to become the TRADOC commander. He came into position with me. Or I came into position with him, as I should say. So I traveled with him, and all the briefs he got as the CG, I just coincidentally got as a sergeant major, not because I was a sergeant major, but just because I arrived with him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it wasn't. If I would have said, "Hey, I'm coming down. You give me a brief," I'd have got the 5 minutes of, me and you bullshitting or whatever it was. Anyway, so I was blessed to get the briefs, and I thought that was important because I think too many times NCOs have a tendency to marginalize themselves, right? How are you going to be value added to the commander at each level? Because nowhere, I mean, shit, man. Listen, I could go through all my doctrine back there that's sitting in the corner, and nowhere in there really is it going to say there's 2 manuals that say something about a sergeant major and what he or she is supposed to do for an organization. But each one I said, you know what? I can't be a dummy as I'm circulating around. Me and John Troxel are very close, and John is one of the most intelligent non-commissioned officers I've ever been around. Deserved to be the SEAC, right? So in his last capacity, John is just brilliant. But he was one of those guys too that would take briefings that a lot of people would sit in on just so that he understood as he was circulating, he had the ability to deliver the message, the higher message. You're getting with stuff. You're really talking about informed stuff as opposed to just hey, what's up with the headquarters? Why are we doing this? Why is the Army downsizing? Why is the Army not letting people re-enlist? Why is the Army cutting back the number of brigade combat teams? Now, a lot of that shit that I just list off isn't important to soldiers, right? But like QSP and QMP, why did we start the QSP program as opposed to QMP? And what was the difference when we were trying to right-size the Army at each pay grade, right? So, and there's math. I mean, it's not a bunch of dummies, man, sitting up there in the Pentagon. Well, there's some dummies, but at least, I mean, HRC at Fort Knox, I mean, they're managing strengths and they're telling people, hey, you got to get out of the. I had a great friend who was an MP. I put this kid through drill sergeant school, Kevin Rogers. And I don't know if you know Kevin. Kevin's a rock star. He was out of 1st Infantry Division. He retired as a provost marshal guy out there. But anyhow, Kevin got his walking papers, and it was simply based off of too many MP sergeant majors in the Army at the time. They wanted the ability to promote those guys and gals that they had already selected for the Sergeant Majors Academy that were in there. And they just, hey, man, you're out. And it didn't matter that the guy hadn't reached his RCP, his retention control point. They were like, hey, retire. There's, so, I mean, it was like, there's a lot of hard decisions. And if you didn't get those briefings with your boss, you wouldn't understand why the Army made those decisions. So you had to do it. So, then in turn,
when you're trying to make large changes like that, you're going to lose some good people. Like, it's just gonna happen, but you have to do it in order to, right. Just like you said, right side of the Army, it's just the unfortunate reality of it.
The CSA said one time, man, so General Odierno, the chief, came to Fort Leavenworth and he said, 3 pegs need to be balanced at all times. And he said, the training and modernization, let me rephrase this. People first, training in readiness, and the third one being modernization. He said if any one of those three pegs starts to go down and does not become balanced with the other two, the Army will hollow out. And I thought it was so insightful for this guy to talk about those three things. And he was saying, the Army's budget, and I'm going to throw out a number here, but it's not correct. He said the Army's budget for people can never be over 50%. If it's over 50%, we're starting to hollow out. We got to take money away from modernization or training and readiness, like going to one of those CTC rotations, and all the training monies that we're providing to these people. So we were like 3% over the personnel account, and hence the reason why. Listen, man. People are living longer. Like me and you, we're going to get retirement for a long time. Clay longer than us because Clay just looks like $1 million right in. He's doing right. Like he's supposed to do. People are living longer, and that personnel account, man, huge. It's the reason why we all got into the transition assistance program. We were paying. We were paying.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember hearing this figure.
We were paying unemployment. And I tell you, man, don't think out of the goodness of the heart, man, everybody in the Army started. Don't get me wrong, goodness of the heart. Yes, that's the reason why we do it. But there's a secondary reason, and that is, hey, you don't want a kid to get out for 365 days and draw unemployment from the Army, because that's right. The kid ain't wearing a rucksack. And we both saw it throughout our careers. Ain't wearing the rucksack, man, yet they're still drawing pay. So tap. Right. So that was just one of the factors. I don't want somebody to get on here and go, Chris, you're fucked up, you're lying. Oh, we love soldiers, big heart. I got all that, man. I'm just telling you, a factor was unemployment.
Yeah, I like the tie-ins with you talking about the time and tenure that you spent at Fort Polk. Stud Ranger NCO that goes off and starts living Abrams Charter, because the light bulb kind of like lit off. As like, I remember being a brand new young sergeant major fresh out of the academy, reselected to serve in the organization. And when at the time, General Carrillo, then Colonel Carrillo, was starting to stand up the emphases of standing up a new charter to refresh our charter to be more relevant with the times. Not an Abrams charter, still not relevant today, but so General Odierno chartered us, and it was so important to the regiment and to General Odierno that they mentioned collaborating with the Centers of Excellence in the current charter. And it's just for the audience out there. I'd like to take a moment to read it. But Odierno's charter, General Raymond T. Odierno, 38th Chief of Staff of the United States Army. The 75th Ranger Regiment remains the most elite infantry force in the world. As the Army's premier special operations raid force with over 10 years of continuous combat experience, the Ranger Regiment must carry on its tradition as a standard bearer for discipline and excellence. It must continue to link our Army's brigade combat teams and special operations forces by migrating its best leaders, training, equipment, and warrior ethos to the operational force in unified land operations, while actively collaborating with the Army Centers of Excellence to further this end. Finally, the 75th Ranger Regiment will stand ready to execute the most difficult joint special operations and forcible entry missions required by our nation.
That's freaking fantastic, Clay. I'll tell you.
Yeah, no shit.
I'll tell you and Mike an interesting story. So I was up at West Point. So twice a year they have this thing called the SLC, the Senior Leader Conference. And it would be like all 2-star level commanders from camps, post stations, installations, divisions, the whole 9 yards. And General Odierno was up there, and he was speaking about branch qualification for officers. And regiment, they weren't getting joint time or whatever it is. But somehow the topic changed, and it went to look at the NCOs in this room and what the Ranger Regiment has done to put this discipline, this training mindset, this, allowing us to do these continuous operations, deployments to both Iraq and Afghanistan. And he points out Ranger Rick, and I think Ranger Rick at the time was 10th Mountain. I think he had backfilled me. Right. I was out at CAC, but maybe it was Force Com, whatever. Rick was there Ray Devins was there. Darren Bond was there. There was like 6 or 7 NCOs, and he goes, "Look at what this has done for our Army." And he said, "The officers, hey, listen," he goes, we can't slow this down on the officers' side or be something that's getting in the way of these guys wanting to serve here, because they're not getting joint credit for, their service here." So General Odierno, man, was very insightful, man, when it came to that. And let's face it, man, when you run into somebody, if you saw a scroll on the right shoulder, right, that gave them some credibility. Now, they could prove that patch is just a patch, and that the individual was just lucky enough to be in the organization when they deployed. Or they could validate that and look at it and have leaders walk away and soldiers walk away going, "I know that guy has a scroll on his right shoulder. And P.S., by the way, I want to be like that guy." So you become a recruiting tool, man, for the regiment.
I agree.
That was great, Clay, by the way, on Odierno's charter. He was a huge believer. I mean, for a 13 series for a field artillery officer, which are typically 0 mils, right? So all our branches are a little bit different, right? So when they are very precise in the way that they do business, and they typically don't think, in my opinion, like a lot of, not all, but some of them don't think like all maneuver, that being predominantly infantry, but infantry armor officers.
Yeah, and to those ends, it reflected a great memory. I remember General Odierno coming down to commission the charter. It was the first day that we officially put on multicams at the Ranger Regiment. We had a day together. That was
Clay. That's
part of that history. It was mentionable.
Yeah, do me a favor, man, and send that to me. Or you probably ought to cut and paste that, man, and put that out on LinkedIn or some other platforms.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Just to remind people about that charter. Listen, I didn't do it intentionally, Clay. So listen, I bounced out of the regiment. I was a marginal ranger. I became a very good soldier. So I could read a book and remember it, meaning a FM, right, or whatever. So I was like an honor graduate or distinguished honor graduate, or at least the commandant's list on every course I went to, right? So I was always getting exceeded course standards, this, that, and I was always fit, right? So I was marginal in the regiment. I used to say all the time, and not marginal. I think I was okay, right? I was good enough to survive the circumstances and the people. I used to say, listen, in regiment, you're swimming with some fast fishes.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. There's a couple fish that are just hauling ass, and you can't keep up with them, right? And that's the Ranger Rick. That's that fish that's running barefooted down the road, right? That's happening. It's those guys that are just, wow. And the Craig Bishops of the world and the Brett Johnsons of the world. I mean, those are the guys, and, I'm so proud of those two, but not surprised from a talent management perspective. But listen, I jumped out into the big Army because I was pretty good in the big Army, man. And frankly, I liked the leadership challenges. So remember, I did a period, not my first tour, but after I was a drill sergeant, I got offered I ran into Colonel retired Owen, and Colonel Owen said, "Hey, do you want to come back?" And I said, "No, I'm going to go to the 82nd. I'd never been to the 82nd. I was just like, fuck, man. I mean, it's a division that requires leadership, the whole 9 yards, and I'm going to go up there as opposed back to regiment. I did that because I reclassified. I was an 11 Charlie who became an 11 Bravo, and I just wasn't comfortable enough because I hadn't been a rifle squad leader inside regiment to do that. So, I mean, that was a very conscious decision on my part to say, no, I need to go and become better, man, at this 11 Bravo 40 versus an 11 Charlie 40. And by the way, I only did it for the money. I mean, the bonus was $0 for being an 11 Charlie reclassify or re-enlisting, or it was $20,000 to be an 11 Bravo. Hey, dude, listen, I could be the dumbest 11 Bravo in the Army, but I had $20,000, right?
Yeah.
I was like, so anyway, Clay, I jumped in and out for those reasons, but I was carried, man. Did we all get carried? But I really got carried by just some tremendous subordinate leaders. And when you learn to work with people differently, it's amazing what you can get out of them. So not treating them all the same. At the end of a JRTC rotation, they used to do the 360s on all the leaders, and I had SMA retired Bill Gates, who works out at JRTC, come to me and he goes, "Chris, I've been doing this a long time." Well, he didn't say Chris. He said Sergeant Major. He's Sergeant Major. I've been doing this a long time. He goes, "I have never seen universally at the brigade level the 5 or 6 battalions universally respect and admire their brigade sergeant major." He goes, "What are you doing?" And I looked at him and I said, by the way, PSA, if any of you guys have watched this or watch it, I apologize. But I go, I lied to them. Every single one of them I'm playing. I said, I know they're all different. So even if they come up with an idea that I think is idiotic, I didn't say, "Hey, John, that's stupid as shit. Why are you bringing that up?" I'd go, "Hey, John, that's a great point. Let's table it and we'll discuss it with other people." So in other words, and by the way, everybody was different. I had one CSM. If I said left, he'd say right. It did not left. Left. It's like, okay, it's a little exhausting. But when you learn people, and that's a people skill, man. That's understanding emotion, having emotional intelligence, right? This thing, EQ. When you have it and you can work with people like that, I'm utterly convinced, man, you can defeat the world.
I agree.
Yep.
So you lied to him.
Nah. Yeah, well, I mean, that was the moral.
I'm messing with you.
Yeah, no, dude. But the moral of the story was, I knew him. I got to know him. I got to understand what made him click as people. And I think that's where some people go wrong. In regiment, I used to say all the time, the difference between big army and regiment, in my opinion, was the dipshit factor. So the dipshit factor in regiment is typically 25%. I think it's 1 in 4. So one of your squad leaders out of 4, one of your platoons out of 4, one of your first sergeants out of 4. It's just that person doesn't quite hold with the other ones. In big army, it's at least 50%, right? It's probably teetering around a little bit higher than that.
Oh my God.
Well,
what I used to say, I love the conversation we're having, by the way. Like, I absolutely love it. Is what I used to tell people when I would talk about, the difference between, Ranger Regiment and then, conventional army. I was like, there's so much talent in the conventional army, but you have to fucking dig for it.
Yeah.
You gotta work for it. You gotta demonstrate that you're different and that you care. You have a whole different, approach to your leadership, like you talked about. You want to hear from them. You want them, to be involved. You want them involved in everything. But you got to really work for it. But when you find it and then you cultivate it, oh man.
Oh, I know. There's a couple CSM guys that are floating out there in the Army, man, and I am so proud to be associated with this guy. And listen, even at the senior level, when I retired out of CENTCOM, my AvSec guy, Air Force Central, was CZ Clone Lopez, who's the current SEAC, right? My TSOC guy from SOCCENT was Rob Abernathy, who's now running the.
God, I love Rob Abernathy.
I said, dude, let me tell you, he taught me CENTCOM because I made the mistake of thinking Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan were like every other country, and so the rest of the 17 were like those two.
All right.
No, fuck no, dude, not even close. So it was Rob, really, to include in Beirut and Lebanon, and in other locations scattered throughout the CENTCOM AOR. It was Rob who understood what was going on. I mean, that guy just, dude, those guys wicked smart. I don't know if it's a product of JSOW. I'm not sure if Rob went to JSOW versus USASM or whatever they call it right now. But But I used to say all the time, the difference between special operations, NCOs, and conventional is in the conventional army, they'll teach you what to think, right? So at USAS, you would get a test, and there was one right answer. It was like A, B, C, or D, right? There was a right answer. In the special operations community, they don't teach you what to think, they teach you how to think. And when you start diving and start thinking critically, man, every NCO I ever knew in the regiment, senior guys, especially now, I mean, Clay's generation, your generation, wow, dude. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to stroke either one of you guys. I'm just telling you factually from a guy who's been out kind of from the outside looking in. I was like, so freaking smart, man, that you would be like, my God, man, this guy's, and it wasn't, again, it was the Mike Hall brilliance. It wasn't the brilliance of the PhD level shit that's flying. It was just the simplicity, and it was like, oh my gosh, man. The talent that exists right now, Mike, out there in the field, Clay, that exists out there in the field. You know, you look at guys like Billy Pouliot, man, who's sitting out there that's, you know, kind of waiting for a job. I was hoping he would already had one. It just becomes tough, man. Everybody's terminal in life and in the Army. Just get the order right? All three of us are living proof that retirement can be okay. All right, when you do it. So, please retire and don't pull a General Bannister and die on the day that you're supposed to retire and get out of the Army.
Yeah. No shit, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the day of or the day before. It was like no shit that day. He was the DCG at 10th Mountain. So when I deployed 10, 11, he was the O as a 1-star prior to coming back to 10th Mountain Division. And he had a young daughter. So he didn't think his wife could get pregnant. And you know, they had a child, and it was later. So it was like when he was a general officer or a colonel, you know, a very senior 06 colonel, that he had a daughter. So tragically, man, not only leaving behind Tracy, his wife, but a young daughter as well.
I was sad. General Bannister, he was my Ranger buddy in Iraq. He was General Odierno's chief of staff when I ran his comms team. I did a lot of runs with General Bannister.
Clay, I did not know you. I did not know that you worked for General O.
I did.
I love the guy.
Right under a year. Yeah, he was a great man to work for. God rest his soul, dude.
God rest.
I was with him from I was with him when they made the transition, and he changed out with General Petraeus up until March, April time frame of the following year, which had been 09. So about 8 months with his team. And I had a couple of months with General Petraeus. I got parked there. I was selected to go there in between my platoon sergeant time and first sergeant time at regiment, and I went right back. I stayed attached and did just under a year. Came back home, and then that's when I took my company.
I was, I mean, that's the same time I was in Iraq. So I was 07 late all the way through 08 March Madness. I was butted up on Solder City and as part of MNDB with General Hammond.
That was tough time. You know, we had to be honest with each other.
Yeah. Those were great times. 2006, 2008. Man,
I remember
bodies. We were stacking bodies all over.
Buddy, you guys
fucking Iraq.
You guys stopped a couple times, man, at FOB Loyalty. So we
were hell yeah. Absolutely.
At FOB Loyalty.
Yep.
We also Bob Rustamaya. So you guys went out. You guys,
I know I definitely shook your hand when I was working with General Odierno. I remember. Is where you were at, senior wise, but I know you met so many members, but I think that's the first time I ever had a true touch point with you. I tried to think about that before we came on the podcast.
Clay, I'll tell you what, man. I mean, we were getting IRAMmed over there, and I will tell you, if you've never been rammed until you've been IRAMmed, and I'm not kidding you when I say the most violent, explosive shit. That's those barrel bombs that they were fucking lobbing over the walls of our tactical infrastructure. Killed three of my kids, but it was so violent, man. I mean, it left craters in paved roads that were like 8 feet deep, and it was just everyone felt like it was hitting this. I was just getting ready to roll, do my daily battlefield circulation when those things started coming in, and I underappreciated it because somebody at Fob Restamaya who had been hit like a month, 2 months earlier, they were telling me about it, and I was like thinking in the back of my mind, it's just a rocket.
Right.
It's a rocket. It's a mortar. Come on, man. Come on. Knock it off with this IRAM shit, this lob bomb crap. Dude, to this day, fuck, man. And that shit is just, it is absolutely horrible with the overpressure and the whole 9 yards. We had like 23 kids wounded, 3 killed. That's the day I had a bad day with my boss, and I said some things in a venue that I probably shouldn't have said. So anyway, yeah, it was tough times, man. And you guys were constantly rolling through. You guys were freaking you were motoring, man. you guys were like, hey.
Back and forth. We lived some long hours. We all did. But I know one of the reasons, because I remember when I got asked to go there, talking to Sergeant Major Pallister, like, why is the Army asking me to go to work for General Petraeus if, because he asked for you, you should interview. It's kind of the way the conversation went. So I get it. But it more or less was the criticality going back to the conversation with the CTCs is they wanted a Ranger communicator in there, an NCO that understood the landscape and the task force. So it's kind of like dual hatted, where I L&O between those two camps there. And trust me, I can attest to it. God rest both their souls. They spent countless hours up at night, making sure that the boys had what they needed to execute without fail. And I was able to be a spoke in that wheel as putting communications together and doing the L&O pieces. But they would do it all. We'd stay up all night. We'd get some rack. We'd knock out a little PT, and General Lowe was back, ready to go, circulate the battlefield. He loved his soldiers. There's no doubt about it. I like you. So, peas in a pod for sure.
I want to.
Well,
oh, good.
Real quick, Mike. The thing about being like an XO, an executive officer to a general officer, right? So depending upon the level, it's either a Colonel 06 for like the 4 stars. Listen, those guys are anointed. So people that work around 4 stars and 3 stars, really the 3 and 4 star, it's a 2-star level too. But if you're around them, truly around them every day, dude, you get an insight to what's going on that is like, holy shit. General Kolashevsky is the 5th Corps commander. He was General Allen when I was the FORSCOM CSM. He was the XO. And I could go across the Army right now with the 3 and 4 star guys to tell you who they were XOs for at the senior level. And it's a talent management thing where they're putting these guys like you, Clay, in a position. I got it. You're just doing communication stuff, or you're keeping him connected and able to communicate. But it was bigger than that, man. You were also getting to witness history. Who wants to read about it when you can make it, right? That's what Marvin Hill used to say all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, hey, man, I love that. Who wants to read about history when you can make it?
So I wanted to. Oh,
Mike, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit, but
yeah,
this is really, really kind of a perspective thing. And again, we're old men sitting here, so we'd love to talk about perspective sometimes. So you talked about the IRAMs, you talked about losing soldiers, on your FOB and everything else, on the base you were on. Okay. So this, we were talking about, us going through all these different outstations all the time. So I remember we went to one, and it was one south of Balad. So it was a Warhorse. I could be wrong. Yeah, Warhorse.
Warhorse was Sergeant Major Daly. So SMA Daly was, he was up there at 3-4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we went through there, and we only did it probably 3 or 4 times, but some days when we would have to do a lot of channel, like crossing channels and stuff like that, because it was so technical. We'd hit the target that we wanted to hit, and we didn't want to drive on that road, especially across this main bridge during the day. So we would just stay there, we'd ROM overnight, and then we would drive back, the next night.
So Route Pluto was one of them that was like just Shitsville that people tried to stay off. Route Predators was another one.
Yeah. Route Predator. Yep.
Yeah, it just sucked. Route Gold, as it rode up through right at the edge of Solder City, was another one. That, I would do battlefield circulation like this in the back seat, man. Just waiting for it, man. I said, "Oh, it's coming, man. Oh, Chris Crack is gonna take one, man." During that,
so we went through this one time, and so we hit, and we had, it was a very, very kinetic target. I mean, we're talking pre-assault fires, firefight, room to room, all this different kind of stuff. I think we were even like, using fires, from gunships and stuff like that to cover our exfil, like as we were, it was a fight on and then a fight during and then a fight off, right? So we stopped by the fob. We're gonna stay there. We get a tent, all this stuff, and so we dekit. And we're going to chow, and some sergeant major, some first sergeant, I don't even quite remember, like just loses his shit. He's like, when you're on this base, you'll be in full kit. The only time you can't be in full kit is when you're sleeping. You come to chow in full. And I just remember, and I kind of got into it with him. And finally I was like, all right, fine. You want me to go get all my kit on? We'll go get all our kit on. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to start pissing people off because it's covered in fucking blood, guts, and fucking brains. So fine, I'll go get it all on right now. But it might also be a sanitary issue. Now, okay, some of my guys, they actually, their kit was pretty dirty, but like not the whole platoon, right? But the reason I highlight that story, other than it's semi badass, is actually because it's about perspective. Now looking at it, I'm like, that sergeant major, or first sergeant, probably maybe like 2 days before had lost like 5 soldiers, to an IRAM, IED, or whatever it was on the fob. Like he had a reason behind it, and he wasn't trying to be the sergeant major or the first sergeant that's focusing on uniforms. Like there was a reason behind it, and here I am, just being a guest and just being a dick for no reason.
If you wouldn't have said that, because to your point, if it's a small joint security station that you're stopping by and they're just giving you a place to friggin' rest overnight, right? That was probably exactly why he was doing it. It was probably indirect. It was probably either an IRAM, depending upon where exactly that you were at. I was about to tell you a funny story where I told Marvin Hill, they came up with this policy that you couldn't wear your Army combat shirt in a chow hall, right? And I was
because most Army soldiers are fat.
Well, you're right.
It's disrespectful.
There should have been a second policy that said not everybody gets to wear the Army combat shirt.
I tell you what, I wanted to do that as a CSM. I wanted to do that, and my JAG wouldn't approve it.
Yeah, but I got it. Hey, I told Marvin Hill, who was Petraeus' CSM, he came to us after we got IRAM'd, Clay, and he was with Sergeant Major. I'm trying to think of who the Corps guy, Allen. He was with guy. And they get into this Army combat shirt thing. And I said, it's fucking retarded. I said, I got guys coming in and gals that are coming from these 26 pieces of tactical infrastructure we got spread throughout the brigade AOR. They're coming here and you want them to play musical shirts. So they have to fucking bring a top to just put it on to go in the dining facility. I go, Sergeant Major, that's fucking dumb, man. I mean, that's just dumbass shit. So funny, let's fast forward a few years, right? And I become the 10th Mountain Division guy. Marvin Hill, he's following Petraeus everywhere he goes. And Marvin comes over to Afghanistan, and he goes, first introduction, we're shaking hands. Hey, Sergeant Major, great to see you again. He goes, you know what, dude? I'll never forget you telling me how fucking stupid I was when I was over in Iraq. I was like, just here it is, man. Just here to this. It was, but Mike Clay, it was funnier than shit, because he said, you know what, I couldn't get that conversation out of my mind right away, and Greca telling me, hey, to some of these kids, that Army combat shirt, this is only for a quick stop, man, to get something, to pick up people, whatever it might be. And then they're heading right back out. Why the fuck we have them put on a normal top? Now, to your point, Mike, you're right. Especially in big Army, not everybody needs to wear the Army combat shirt, right? So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I do know some Rangers that probably shouldn't be wearing combat shirts too, but yeah.
There was this very senior CSM, and I went out with him one time, and then we were going to go out a second time. And the first time he said, "Hey, what's the uniform?" And I said, "Well, I'm just telling you what I'm going to wear, and I was going to wear this, whatever. I'm going to wear the Army combat shirt." And this guy wasn't showing off too well, right? So I didn't want to embarrass the sergeant major anymore because he looked like shit, kind of. Right. And so I was like, next time he said, "Hey, we're circulating, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Hey, let's wear our normal tops because we're going to go and get." I only did that, frankly, to help a brother out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, man, listen, I'm fat as fuck right now, right? Getting old is not easy, right? Getting older is not easy. So I'm not trying to be overly critical, but to your point, not everybody needs to wear everything that they're given, man. So,
absolutely. Well, Sergeant Major, we've been covering a lot. We've been rapid firing, but I want to dial us back just a little bit and focus on the regiment, for a little bit.
Yep.
And it is a Legend of the 75th podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I've loved everything we've talked about, and it's been an epic conversation. But one thing that you talked about was that you initially went to Korea.
Yep.
And I would love for you to kind of talk about, did you want to go to Ranger Regiment and just something happened, you found yourself in Korea, or what led to you? What did that journey kind of look like? You ended up in Ranger Regiment.
Yeah, hey, Mike and Clay, and I'm going to share a story, and it's probably going to be hard to validate some of this, but I swear to God, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye, man. I'm fucking telling you the truth on this stuff. So I went to Korea, and I had an NCO. I lived in a Quonset hut. This was in the days prior of hooches and shit. So I lived in a Quonset hut with like 17 of my closest friends, and I had an NCO, and his name was Sergeant Solace. And one night we were drinking some soju, and whatever, he saw potential or something. Now, listen, he had never been in the Ranger Regiment, but he had a Ranger tab, and he was the only guy with a Ranger tab. And he said, "Greca, you need to go to the Ranger Regiment." So this was in the days of 4187s with the 4 copies or whatever, and it had that paper shit. So you filled it out with a pen, and I got drunk and requested assignment to the Ranger Regiment. Well, I get orders, and the orders say, "Hey, you're going to 275." I was not airborne qualified. And they said, "So you got to go to airborne school first." I was like, "Fucking cool, man. This fucking kicks it." So I go back, bought a little Fiero, which sucked, man. It was a little fucking gay car, but I drove it down from Illinois to Fort Benning, Fort Moore, in order to go to airborne school down here. And I do that. Well, while I'm down here, this guy in OG 107, it's a solid green uniform. He's an LNO to the Ranger Regiment. He's wearing the black beret. He's got a high and tight. And at the time, anyway, when I was younger, when I was 19 or 20, I probably appreciated that haircut more than I do now, right? So I was like, look at this guy, man. He's just fucking strapped. His shit was starched, highly starched. Those boots were so fucking shined. And he said, "Everybody who's coming to RIP, get over here." I was like, what the fuck is RIP? I never even know. Nobody told me about this RIP shit, right? So he goes up and he goes, "Listen, after graduation, whatever," and he puts out this little brief. And I said, "Sergeant, man, can I talk to you real quick?" And I snapped a parade rest because I've been in the Army, right? And I know the game. I can look the part. I'm kind of fit, but not really. So I asked the guy, I said, "Hey, my dad wants to come down for fucking graduation. Are we going to have time? Like, am I going to have that weekend? This is a Friday afternoon where we graduate. Am I going to have the weekend to spend with my father? If I start this RIP thingy right away, I'm not going to have him come. But if not," he goes, "No, he can come." So I swear to God, Mike and Clay, this is a true story. I get my wings pinned on me, and then I see a bunch of shuffling, and I hear Greca, Greca, and I'm like, oh, there's that fucking Rip guy, man. There's that L&O guy. So I go running over, and I'm just thinking, I go, Dad, I'll be right back. And I went over there, and I snapped the brake rest. I go, yes, Sergeant. He goes, grab your shit and get on the fucking bus. And I was like, Sergeant, you told me that my dad could come down. He goes, shut the fuck up. Your options are either you quit right now or you get on and do this Rip thing. So I went to the top of Cardiac Hill. There was 121 of us. I think this can be validated. 19 of us graduated 3 weeks later. So 19 out of 121. And here's the part you're going to have trouble validating. I was the first Ranger private PFC specialist in RIP to be selected for regimental recon detachment. I actually graduated with the scroll, even though my order said 275. I was picked. I was picked in RIP to go to RRD. They were like, so they called me in. They made me do some fucking push-ups and some flutter kicks, whatever, man. There was a guy, Sergeant Schott, that was in there. Another guy, a Sergeant Lindstrom. And there was like 2 other dudes in there. And they said, hey, how far can you swim? And I said, Sergeant, I'm not going to drown. I go, I can't give you a distance. I mean, is it a mile? Is it 2 miles, 3 miles? I just can tell you I'm not going to drown. It's like, if you ask me the question of how far can I carry a 120-pound rucksack, I'm just not going to quit. I'm not going to give you a distance. So at graduation, I had a regimental flash on and I had a regimental scroll on when we graduated. And then after the ceremony, they said, Greca. And I freaking went up there and again, snapped a parade rest for Lindstrom. And he said, hey, are you 11 Charlie? I was like, yeah, I thought you knew that, Sergeant. I mean, shit, you get the right. I'm not saying it like this. I'm like, yes, Sergeant. And he's like, dude, Colonel Taylor, the regimental commander, we're short on 11 Charlies. We're using 11 Bravos in all the battalions. We can't pull you. So you're going to proceed on orders. And I swear to God, man, my thought was, thank God. Thank God. Because I was getting smoked for 3 weeks. Dude, I was so beat down like a fucking dog, man. There were so many times I wanted to quit, inside RIP. I'm just putting on this external show, right? Everything we're doing. But, I mean, were there times I wanted to quit? Fuck yeah. Why didn't I quit? Because others were quitting, and I was getting my strength based off of these other people that were all, I've seen Rangers out there, and, the first guy to quit was like, I'm a sergeant. I've been out at Fort Lewis. I've seen Rangers in action. All you weak guys, I'm going to lead this class. Shit, he was the first guy by midnight, man, to have quit. So that's how I got to 275 was through Sergeant Solace. It started off great. So I've got a funny story, but it's not a funny story. So my time in regiment started off great. They will tell you, and I think you both know, how long does it typically take a private to get there, or a new guy, let's say a new guy, to get there and go to Ranger school? I think if somebody was kicking ass, it would be 6 months. If he was really an ass, 6 months. But probably everybody was looking at the goal of about a year, 9 months to a year, depending upon.
Right.
I went to Ranger school, having been in 275 for 2.5 months.
Holy shit.
I got there. I did an FTX. We did EIB. I was like the second guy done, like slightly over 2 hours. I was the only person to get the EIB in my platoon, weapons platoon. Again, I was an 11 Charlie guy. So I went to Ranger school. So I was back so fast that the RIP instructors were like, what the fuck are you doing back here? I'm like, I'm in fucking pre-Ranger. But I didn't pass the first time. And here's where it goes bad. I was 4 and 1 on patrols in Florida. So that was 4 phase. The last phase was desert phase in Dugway. I was the number 2 man on a boat. The water level was kind of low. And as we were going down the Yellow River to do our last hit on whatever that island is called down there in Santa Rosa, down there in Florida, my knee hit the stump and it pushed it inward, and I was convinced it ripped my ACL. I mean, my knee immediately swelled up. That's what the RIs thought too. Now they injected and they looked at it, but it didn't. But it tore my meniscus in half, and they strained some other things. So I got med drop, dude, and I've never been so fucked up in my life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was just, I was a disappointment to myself. There was no reason to come back without your tab ever, right? So it's like, oh my God, man. So I had to go back without my tab, watching people go and come. And it took me about a year. I think I went back to Ranger School a little over a year later. Once I healed, got it together. In every phase, I had something happen. First phase, I got sun poisoning on my fucking head after they shaved all my hair off. Second phase, I got cellulitis in my heel. I drained it myself. I had a medic give me a scalpel and say, hey, dude, you got two choices. I'm supposed to drop you right now, but if you stick this fucking thing into your heel almost completely, you'll see the pus drain. Then if it works out, you can stay in. So I stayed in, did that. Went to Florida, made it through, went to Dugway, rolled off Wig Mountain. It was a live fire that we used to do out at Dugway. Broke my wrist. So I walked the last phase with a cast on my hand and had to beg the battalion commander not to med drop me again, a second time. I mean, I was practically crying to that fucking guy saying, hey, sir, it's my right arm. I'm left-handed. I can fire with my left hand. I'm good to go. So I actually graduated with a cast on my wrist, and then I just ripped it off. The second I graduated and pinned that tab on, I was like, fuck this cast. It's off. So my Ranger School experiences, dude.
Not for the faint of heart.
Well, not for a faint of heart.
Right there.
I was an angry guy, man. I mean, when I went back, you talking about fighting, dude, I could tell you stories, man, that you would be like, no way. I'm like, way. I was an energetic young man who was mad at the world. And when I was mad at the world, I was fit. I got I'm injured, right? My knees fucked up, but it's like, dude, Chris Greca would prefer to just kick your ass over, anything else. So I was really angry, man, at that. And it took my wife. So I met my wife, and my wife was one of the ones that said, hey, you're going to go get a Ranger tab, and your fucking ass ain't coming back until you get one. And then I got it. And then when I went to PLDC, she was like, hey, do they have like this top guy there? And I'm like, well, they have the distinguished honor graduate or honor graduate. And I was the honor graduate, but not the distinguished honor graduate, right? So my wife was like, you're a fucking loser, man. L sign, big L sign, you're fucking floor. And every course I went to, my wife was sitting over my shoulder going, what the fuck, man? You better be, why weren't you the honor graduate? So yeah, she was always pushing me. And when I was in regiment, the two proudest things that happened when I was in 275 is, again, I'm an 11 Charlie, is we won the regimental best mortar section competition in both 91 and 93. And I was so proud of that, Mike, Clay, because it was the collective. And my guys were so good. I said this all the time. Good 11 Charlies know that their 11's first and the Charlie comes secondary. Poor ones, a 13 goes in front of the Charlie, and they get confused about what their MOS is. In other words, their ability to react to contact, to defend, to assault, to defend a mortar firing position, all the rest of that stuff, move tactically. How do you do that? And that's what my guys were superb at. And listen, the competitions weren't even close. I mean, we had won them after they were 2-day competitions, but after the first day, we could have just stopped competing because it was a done deal. That's my proudest moments in regiment, was the sections on those 2 years. And then I go away for 5 years, and then I eventually come back, or 6 years, I guess it's 6 years. 6 years. And then I come back just on a wing, man. Listen, I wasn't looking to come back to regiment, right? So I got a call. I was a first sergeant over in the Joint Security Area, the JSA over in Korea, right? One company over there, U.S. company, 300 plus people. Craig Nixon was my boss over there, his first battalion commander stint prior to commanding 375 and then eventually regiment. But Craig was my battalion commander over there. Listen, I had autonomy, complete autonomy over there on the DMZ, the Korean DMZ. And at the time, it was like, man, this is the best gig in town. This was 99 to 2000, right? That time period. So 9/11 has not happened yet. Right. So I was like, holy shit, man, it's this job. And I got a call from the RSM that said, hey, I want to bring you back. And I was like, initially, I was like, I don't think, I said, Sergeant Major, let me talk to my wife and see what she's thinking about it. Cause I was like, I don't know, man. I was supposed to go to the 101st I changed my 82nd shift almost as fast as I got over to Korea. I changed my assignment from the 82nd. Once I finished that assignment to Fort Campbell, but I wasn't sure. God, am I proud? Glad I did it. Just met more phenomenal human beings. I had certainly known people from 275, but really that network at 175 with your Doug Greenways and your Darren Bonds and your Jim Mingus and all those characters, Chris Vanek over there, the majors, the captains that were over there, right? And even lieutenants. I mean, shit, you got Burgess, who's the deputy commanding general of 7th ID. Hell, fucking Ken Burgess was a lieutenant for Chuck Maserati. So with Gunny Barreras, by the way,
okay.
Yeah, so I'm glad I did it. But initially, man, I was like, again, it's an Abrams charter guy, changed Odie Erno's charter, I guess. But Chris Greca was out there going, okay, I'll go do this. And then when I got to 175, I backfilled Ranger Rick. He was the ops, and I became the ops at 175. Ended up staying in position longer than initially told because none of the first sergeants made the sergeant major list. They were all eligible, and none of them made it. So it was like, holy fuck, man, here we go. I got to stay in this position. But interestingly, when 9/11 happened, I was with Doug Greenway on the back of a C-130 flying from England to Hungary to do a special operations exercise right over in Hungary. And the pilot came back. We were all sleeping. We were like one of the last aircraft that was going into Hungary, kind of pushing from England. And the pilot came back and said, listen, the World Trade Centers got hit. The Pentagon got hit. There's 17 hijacked aircraft in and around U.S. airspace. Now, the latter became kind of the fog of war thing where they were trying to get in touch. But listen, we all looked at everybody and said, okay, change of mission. This is just part of the exercise. We didn't think it was real. I mean, who's stupid enough to hit the World Trade Centers really in real life? Who really would hit the Pentagon? I mean, that shit doesn't happen, right? So it probably took Doug, myself, the good doctor, Captain Proctor, and a couple others, probably took us 5 hours to figure out it was real. We just all went back to sleep when he said that. And then they landed. Instead of taking us to Hungary, they got grounded. Everybody got grounded. So we were all excited because we landed in tax-free money in Bosnia, I think was where we landed. We were all like, woohoo, 1 month tax-free money, man. Make sure, sir, that you get this on a memorandum, man, so we ain't got to pay taxes this month. And it took a little while to figure out that thing was real. But that was my venture initially into 175, and then into 9/11 and post 9/11. And then I did the first deployment with them post 9/11 as the ops, as General Mingus's ops sergeant major. By the way, I was terrible. I was a horrible ops sergeant major, man. I was a horrible ops sergeant major. I'm just going to throw that out there for the record. And then I did 2 rotations as a first sergeant, one to Iraq and one to Afghanistan. So the initial push when we did the Jessica Lynch mission over in Iraq, I did that one, and then I did one to Afghanistan. Then I made the sergeant major's list, and it was time to leave.
Yeah.
So it was short. I mean, total about 6 years, a little over 6 years, 6.5 years in regiment, maybe 7 as you count it up. So, probably a quarter of my life. But I'll tell you, man, that Ranger Creed, dude, when I started, when I figured that Ranger Creed out right here, man, my wife gave me this Ranger Creed crystal.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
On here, yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, she got this for me for graduating from Ranger School, and everywhere I've went, man, and that's why I don't know why people don't know the Ranger Creed, because I do, Mike.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many things. Start with the NCO Creed.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad.
All right. Sorry,
I mean, Clay probably knows it.
Yeah, Clay knows.
Because he was like the recruiter of the century or something like that. So like he knows every creed. He knows creeds that like other people didn't even know exists. Like he just knows everything. But yeah, I was. I mean,
I didn't know
I did NCO induction ceremonies, so I made sure that I knew it. But I didn't know it. I didn't know it before I was a conventional Army CSM. I'll tell you that.
I didn't know the Army had a song when I went.
That's true. Yeah.
It was like they what?
Yeah.
They want to sing this fucking song. I'm like, who has a song? Then I got to 10th Mountain Division, and they're like, gotta know the song. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Now I know the 10th Mountain Division song.
You know what division song I know? The 82nd Division song. And I've never served in the 82nd, but my roommate in BNOC, his alarm clock was the 82nd Division song. So for 6 weeks, I heard that fucking song, and he was one of those guys that didn't wake up, So so it was literally, and I don't.
Dude, you're old, man. You're old. When you say BNOC instead of LC or whatever that first one is, dude, you're old, man.
Yeah, whatever. No matter how old you are, it's still called beer knock.
It is. BNOC, ANOC.
Well, every school, I was probably like you guys, man. So I was really fortunate, man. So even when the Army was having its lean years, I BZ'd every rank, right? So I made every rank in the secondary zone, right? So it was like I was really moving along. That's why I couldn't understand. Like I went to USASMA with Daly, and Dan had been in the Army a couple years less than me, and I'm like, how's that even fucking possible, man? With time and grade, time and service, the way it's played, the way you rank ordered on the selection list. They said he's behind me. But what happened was I got picked for promotion and attendance to USASMA. So I go in as a sergeant major, the 6-month course. Daly only makes USASMA, but why they come out with a second list because they're going to start these things called brigade combat teams. And move us around. And that's how Dan, kind of like caught up.
Yeah.
And we were serving together as I was force com and he was trader. I like Dan. Dan's a good guy.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity last year to spend a week, about 3 days with him up at a West Point followership seminar. This is like the last thing I did kind of as a CSM over at First SF. I got the opportunity to do it.
Cool.
And
that's cool.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was actually really cool. It was him, Kim Scott, which is the author of Radical Candor, and a couple other individuals. And we just, we participated in stuff and panels and all these different kind of things, but like we just, and we just got to sit around and, talk about all kinds of shit. It was so fun, and he is really just a great guy. He really, honestly.
No, that's right. Not only a great guy, he got a lot of people kicking him because they're like, well, he didn't even go to airborne school. He didn't go to airborne school because he never served an airborne assignment. And frankly, Dan will tell you, hey, listen, now he little confused about the origins of Ranger School and kind of the purpose and the whole 9 yards. But listen, Dan has his shit together. One of the best things I got to do when I was force com and CAC was go to the Center for the Army Profession and Ethic when Cape was still up at West Point. They moved it to Leavenworth now. It's part of that whole Capel thing that they've got going on. But I went up to West Point on a couple occasions and just sitting in classrooms with those students, just talking, man. I mean, they're asking questions, and what they're doing is they're really sizing you up, right? They're looking at you, Mike, going, that's going to be my platoon sergeant. That's the only thing they give a fuck about is when they graduate, are my NCOs going to fight me in all my decisions, right?
Yeah,
just having those conversations about trust and those conversations about how you build cohesive teams and those conversations about, you always don't need to be right. And then finally, and we got some educated NCOs out there now, man. I mean, so it used to be, when I came in, the Army was filled with dummies. All right. we had 875,000 people. We had 16 divisions, 5 corps. I know I'm getting the 875 right. And we didn't cut almost in half until post Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then we cut to 500,000, deleted 6 divisions because, again, we couldn't afford people, right? And it was, how do you modernize and do everything else like you need to do? But that was done back then, and that's when the professionalization of the NCO Corps. How do you become better? I used to say this with our Clay, you'll appreciate this too, in the CENTCOM AOR. We'll send all these senior NCOs, our partners, right? Our partner nations. We'll send them to things like USASM or these Ranger School or these different courses. And then they go back to their countries and they get marginalized, man. And you talk about marginalized, it's like, shut the fuck up, go sit over there in a corner and go read a fucking book. And by the way, not a manual, because knowledge to a lot of our partner nations is the key to having the credibility. I can't tell you how frustrated I was trying to get Iraqi NCOs to take some disciplined initiative when the lieutenant wasn't around. Hey, what are you going to do if the lieutenant isn't around, but you put a vehicle here and you can't see shit because you're masked by this building? Yet if you move up 25 yards, you'll have fucking clear fields of fire. I'm going to stay where I'm at. Yep. What? No, you're not. All right. Let's try this fucking exercise again. What are you going to do if I'm going to stay right where I'm at until the lieutenant tells me to move? Yep. I'm like, God damn, man. I was like, holy fuck. So
drink chai.
Yep.
I love going up to West Point. I dig nothing more. It was COVID time, and I went and I got my master's degree from Norwich, right? And I did that because I had some tuition assistance left. I had 18 months to give because I wanted to do the whole program, because it's done in a cohort clump where you start and you finish together. But I went and got my master's degree in organizational leadership, and I started reading things about semantic redefinitions of the brain and how we freeze, stuff the way we do things. And I'm like, when you're trying to lead change, and in the world today, that's what it's about. It's about agility. It's about who's agile enough to think and to understand that as the environment changes, so too does your solution need to change. So, but it was phenomenal. Norwich, I love kids. I'm trying to get myself into some of these places where I can just go in there and sit down and talk to these guys, man, guys and gals. Character development.
Awesome.
So,
I do.
I agree. And based off this podcast, we definitely need to, help with that. You have so many amazing messages that just people need to hear. And that's a big thing, that Clay and I talk about is like the knowledge that is gained in these podcasts. Like they're worth their weight in gold. Cause what we're really, what we're talking about here. And I'm sorry, Chris, how many years did you do? 32? 31. Okay. Yeah. So I was pretty close. But 31 years of experience. And here's the kicker. There's plenty of guys that have 31 years in the Army. Okay. Not a lot, but there's plenty, but none of them have your perspective. None of them have done exactly what you've done. Not a
Correct.
one. Not a one. You know, we've done quite a few of these. Okay. And I think between Clay and I, we happen to know a lot of Rangers, well, at least a few, you know. You're the only one that's like done Korea, 275, gotten out, drill sergeant school, all the different things that you did, back to 175, then, you know, Fort Polk, you know, then, you know, and all that, like, you're the only one that's ever done that. So, you know, there's just so many, you know, rhymes that can match other people's, you know, current path that they can gain insights from.
Mike, when you and Clay do these podcasts, so training education.
We don't wear pants. No, you're right.
I got it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but as training, education, and experience define us all. Again, training, education, and experience. And what differs us all, what differs us all is the experience pillar and how it differs, man. So as you're determining, I know it's Legends of the 75th. I got that. And you've had some tremendous, I've watched your podcast. You guys have had some tremendous guests that are on here. But those things to highlight, we're close, me, you and Clay. Training, we're pretty close. All right. We've all been to Ranger schools and done the schools and the Path 5, you know, the rest of that, and all done the professional military education thing. Education, we're all close. I mean, especially with PM, again, with professional military, but civilian education, we're all kind of getting there. But experience is how we all differ. And that gives us a lens in which that gives us a lens.
I love that.
You know, and it's not that it's ignorant people. I used to say all the time, man, I hear some people bitching about stuff and they go, hey, these guys are, and I would go, they just don't know. They just don't know. I sat in a room with President Obama and 9 other people talking about the Islamic State. And it was just so fucking incredible to sit in there and just listen. I don't even know why I was in there. I was beside the Secretary of Defense, I was the dumbest dude in the fucking room. All right. So, but to listen to the conversation, even with President Obama and Susan Rice, listen, man, they were fucking glued on. This whole Islamic State thing is they were coming from Syria and they were going through Mosul and cutting down through Baji, or getting close to Baji in the oil fields and getting close to Baghdad. They were extremely fucking glued on. So what makes me a little bit different than most is I've sat in on meetings like that. Right. And by the way, I went to the HASC and the SASC as my boss testified in front of Congress. And I did that for a reason. Number one was to extract the information, understand our civilian leaders and kind of what they were looking at. But it was for the optic that my boss was being supported by his enlisted formation, his soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, the joint. So there's a couple happy snaps out there where me and Darren Bond are sitting out there behind our bosses as they're testifying in front of Congress. And we did that for a reason. But it's the experiential thing, buddy. And I'll tell you, that lens in which we see things is fucking everything, man. It's everything.
I agree.
Yeah, I remember listening in on that briefing and watching it on C-SPAN and seeing the pictures. You know, the highlight for a lot of the subscribers, especially some of our younger Rangers that are out there, to show that 2 175 veterans who served together as first sergeants were sitting behind their 4-star nominated bosses at the height of the war on terror. Way to live the creed there, Chris. I couldn't think of a finer example, and the charter, for that matter, as we had a charter discussion again here tonight. That was a really cool defining moment in not only American history, but in our Ranger history, as you all went out and just crushed it through those ranks.
Well, Clay, thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you, Darren was AFRICOM, as you know, when I was CENTCOM. So we used to T-Bird, Tannenberg, as we were kind of circulating throughout our own AORs. But we had similar problems as you went west from Egypt and you started getting into the Africa and, their problem with violent extremist organizations. So we had a lot of similarities and we were sharing assets that were out there as well. So, you got to have some people who understand that stuff. And oh, by the way, then can talk to privates, man. I mean, the real key is how do you tailor your message according to your audience so that they listen. A private, it resonates with the private. And then when you get with a battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel and above, CSMs and above, you can start telling a message that they go, oh, fuck, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, man, I didn't have any idea about that right there. And it's like, dude, that's why I exist, man, is to help you better understand the environment out here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Sergeant Major. Well, all right. So I'm gonna let I'll let Clay ask the last question. We're gonna start wrapping up because we're getting over 2 hours. But so I told my wife that I was sitting down with you and recording a podcast, and she reminded me of a story about you. All right. So I don't know if you remember this or not, but class what class was I? 67. You sat in class 67. You were the guest speaker, and yeah, it was an unruly bunch. And again, I will apologize again for my fucking cohort and how disrespectful they were during your guest speech during the academy. It still pisses me off to this day.
Yeah,
you started singing. You've lost that love and feeling from Top Gun. And it still stands as one of the coolest things. And this was I think a couple months before you retired.
It was.
It's still like one of the coolest things that I've ever seen, because everybody at first was like, wait, what? And then everybody was like, oh man, this is a great song. And then everybody started singing, and it was just a phenomenal experience. So
well, thank you for that. And I know we got to get to Clay to wrap this thing up, but yeah, I was honored to be out there. Funny though, I've been wearing that dress mess jacket of mine for 20 years. 20 years. I got it.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was the first time the button popped. So it actually broke when I was there, which should have been an indicator to slow down on the eating. But fucking, I was retiring at the right time. So anyway, Mike, thanks for all of this. Clay, to you, buddy.
Oh, right on. I could totally. I'm getting a mental picture of you singing that.
It was fucking epic, man. It was so cool.
That's totally Chris Greca too. I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you.
So one of the questions we like to ask all our guests is we've talked about a lot of different things, but just like a pointed audience, a direct message. If you could speak to all Rangers, past, present, and future, what would you say to each one of those populations?
I think it's to the active Rangers. It's listen. Although we're old, one of the coolest experiences I had was in 1991. It was again that best mortar competition, Ranger Rendezvous time, but it was the 50th anniversary of the formation of the Rangers, right? And that's when Ranger Memorial, we were paying for bricks. We started paying for bricks. Dietz came out with the very first print, Rangers Lead the Way. And they had all these World War II guys that showed up, Merrill's Marauders. And now they're almost all gone, right? So, as we've gotten older, all three of us, right? We're 30 years, all of us, I know we are, from the time we joined the Army, at least. You know what I'm saying? A guy like me, so we're creeping up on 40 years. How do you leverage that just experience, man? I mean, I got it. Technology changes, but what doesn't change is the heart of a Ranger, right? Because that will always stay consistent. To the retired Rangers out there, I would say try to stay connected. I haven't done a good enough job, right? There's this mentorship program that they're doing through 3 Rangers, and I know they support y'all. But what can we do to assist Rangers, not only while they're serving, but then while they're transitioning as well? And that leads me to the last point. I'm really big on mental health, right? And I know what depression looks like. I know how it manifests itself. It's not about curling up in a ball and crying. That is not depression. And if you know what it looks like, there's a great song out there by Craig Morgan after he lost his 19-year-old son. And it starts out with him talking about, he gets this phone call and his friends come to town and want him to go out and show him around. And he says, no, my wife, Karen, she's not feeling well. And I got a long list of honeydew stuff. And he says he hangs up the phone and he just sits back down and turns up the music. That's depression. All right. And it was depression caused from him losing his son and losing that energy to get back out there and do things. Know what depression looks like, losing interest in things that formerly were fun. Again, losing that energy and that initiative that was out there, staying isolated, away from friends and just staying in your house. It's called the safe place, right? So I'm a huge fan of we've got to look out for one another, Clay. And it starts with guys like us, as older, and I say it starts with us. It's collectively inclusive of everybody you mentioned. And we just got to look out for one another.
We sure appreciate you sharing those thoughts. That's a great closeout with a great conversation for now, 2 hours, and I'll give you your alibi. I see you.
Yeah, just one alibi. Live the creed. Live the creed. If you do that, I promise you, because it's everything we've talked about over the course of this last 2 hours is in our Ranger creed. So what Mike started out with about the creed, it's all about the fucking creed. Sorry, that's my alibi. That's my alibi.
No, that was a good alibi.
Good. That was great points, and we certainly appreciate you spending your evening with us and enlightening us with your Ranger story, your continued leadership, your friendship, the brotherhood. It's just always good to be with Chris Greca. I tell you, my cup's full from a couple hours, and we look forward to being in touch with you on some further initiatives that we have that we'll talk in separate correspondence. We definitely like you to be considerate of joining some other efforts that we have on some of the subjects that we talked about at the tail end of the podcast.
Yeah, Clay, listen, man, I'm here to support. And every time I see you and your wife, man, it always brings a smile to my face. You're one of those people. I think the first time I remember meeting you was actually at Gunny Barreras' funeral. And I know we had met before that, but it was the first time it really stood out that me and you got in a conversation when we were out there burying Gunny. So anyway, always brings a smile on my face, man, when I see you, dude. So I can't wait to see you here. Hopefully you're here for the maneuver conference. If not, completely understand, buddy.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Yep, got it. All right, guys. Thanks, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, man. You guys have a great evening.
You too.
All right, later, guys.
Okay, I guess he's off. That's good. All right. Well, hey, then we're going to take a second then. We're going to actually seize an opportunity here. Hey, Clay, before we actually started recording the podcast, you and I were talking about a couple things. And I'll tee it off. And Clay, if we want to cut this out, we can always cut this out. I'm ad-libbing a little bit here, but ever since we did the mental health roundtable, we've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of amazing feedback, and you and I were talking before the episode. So just for everybody listening, we're definitely looking at probably September timeframe, more details to follow when we're going to do the next one. Important thing that we need to make sure we do for this next one is we're going to try to set up some kind of a recovery effort, for lack of a better term, that follows the podcast, where people can call in that need help. Because what we noticed from the last one is it spurred a lot of emotions. I sure in the hell know it did for me. I was mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted afterwards. So that's one thing we're looking at. But another thing that we want to talk about is we get a lot of feedback about why are we paying for a podcast? Why are we paying for this podcast? And I get why a lot of people might have a adverse reaction to a podcast like this. And, I'll take that head on. Making a professional podcast in the way that we do is not free. When you go from the platform, the digital things that we need to use, from the Zooms to all the subscription stuff, just even with Red Circle or whatever kind of platform you're using, to the edits, to the video production and everything else, it costs money. And what I was telling Clay, and we were kind of walking the dog on, actually for the first 9 months of Legend of the 75th podcast, it was all out of pocket. I was paying for it all. The subscription rate was not enough to actually pay for the work that we had being done. And I don't need to necessarily throw out the figure there, but it was pretty substantial. Now we are in a place where we're actually, I guess you could say, profitable. And when I say profitable, I want everybody to be very understanding of this. That does not mean that Clay and I are making any money off this podcast. We are not paying ourselves for this podcast. We're not doing anything with that money except for donating it right now and letting it stack up so that we can fund some future efforts. And I don't want to talk about it too much because I just don't want to, it's not that I, don't want to like give away the secret. We just want to make sure that it's actually going to happen in the way that we want it to happen before we start kind of getting it out there. But lastly, the thing I will say, and then I'll just, see if Clay has anything else, is you are helping to pay to preserve Ranger history. You are helping to create something that has never, ever existed before. There has never been an encompassing platform that is that captures Ranger history in the free flow form that we do from the individual perspective. It's never happened. Technology, all this different kind of stuff, it's never happened before. And we are going to serve as a database that is going to preserve Ranger history forever. And I'm extremely proud of that. But I also want everybody to take ownership of that and help realize that you are part of that and you are the reason that we are doing it. And you are a very, very important piece of that.
Well said, Mike. I agree with everything you just shared with the subscribers out there that are dialing in and listen to another great podcast. Several months ago, peeling it back, what I'll add is I was humbled to be asked to be a featured guest back in the November timeframe of last year. Did an interview with Mike in December, came out, and Mike approached me 5 or 6 months later, I guess it was.
You had to deal with that whole cancer thing for a little while.
Yeah. Had to beat that down for a minute, and he gave me a little time to rest and recover. And I was done drinking water and facing out and pulling security. And he asked if I would like to join him as his co-host, and I was exceptionally humbled by his faith and confidence in me to be part of something that he's built to preserve Ranger history. And I said, if you need one and your intent and purpose is to preserve Ranger history and help our Ranger community, count me in, because you have one. And that's the direction we're going. We've been partnered up for about 120 days now. Mike and I do lead pretty active and busy lives with our families and also have civilian careers, both predominantly affiliated with startup companies. If you want us to do a podcast on that, we probably will eventually.
That's a good point.
Clunkiness of a startup in the Ranger Creed helped us a lot with that too, and it still is. But we just wanted to share with the audience tonight that hey, your generous subscriptions are helping to preserve Ranger history and going to be part of something foundational that's going to be big, and we're going to continue to grow it, and you're going to see it, and we'll continue to be as transparent as glass in everything. And we love each and every one of you. We know a lot of you that are subscribing personally. Some we haven't met yet, but we look forward to traveling throughout the country, attending other events, being part of other nonprofit activities that we will be complimentary to and not compete with. We'd like to start writing checks to support those great nonprofits out there. One in particular, I'd say, has been super helpful to us is Three Rangers Foundation. Sergeant Major retired Mike Hall, Colonel retired Chris Vanek. They're doing great things out there. Marcus Hall, the Three Rangers, they already have those systems in place, but at the same time, they need to continue to generate revenue. We'd like to be a tremendous help to them as well in the monetary realms to continue to do things for you and your families out there as you're partaking in those events. We hope to put together another great mental health roundtable for you all in September. A lot of great feedback, obviously some things we can improve upon. We've received a lot of after action report type information that we're consolidating, and we're gonna dial that down, much like what Mike spoke about. But we wanted to take this opportunity tonight after we finished off with Sergeant Major retired Chris Greca, just to address that, give the folks that are dialing in weekly, listen to great stuff, some nuggets to chew on because we felt you needed them, and I appreciate you teeing this up, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, hey, thank you everybody for tuning into the Legend of the 75th podcast. Hey, please share this episode so we make sure that it gets out to all of our Ranger buddies. Rangers, lead the way.
Rangers, lead the way.